Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's podcast. I am Chloe Tetro. I'm the health coach here with Ready Care. For this morning, we're going to be looking at part 2 of our 4-part series on beliefs. Today's topic is going to be an overview of beliefs and emotions. So that is a look at both, a recap of what beliefs are, a look at a deep dive into what it is that emotions are, because I think we utilize the term, totally all the time, feelings, emotions, and we have a fair idea of what they are. But it's really looking at the relationship between those emotional drivers and how they correlate to beliefs, and down the line, how they correlate to our ability to enact from a clear space that brings us closer to what it is that we're trying to achieve, rather than fall prey and fall, how would you put it? Go with the flow, but in a negative way. Go with the flow with our emotions and be totally overrun by them in a way that runs totally out of our awareness, that we don't even realize that they have such a massive grip on our emotions. So, as a recap of beliefs, cognitive representations of our understanding of the world. So they influence our perception, our interpretations, and decision-making processes. They're ingrained and they're shaped by factors like culture, upbringing, that's the big one, and personal experiences, that's the second big one. They're basically filters by which we make sense of lots of different sensory information, lots of different stimuli in our world, and we determine responses based from those particular filters. They're a massive role in the formation of our identities and contribute to the development of our self-concept, who we believe ourselves to be. And even if we kind of think about it culturally, a lot of people would define themselves by their beliefs. I am a person who believes XYZ. They are fairly fixed if left unexamined. So almost nothing with the human being is fixed if it can be examined, if it can be brought into awareness. Emotions, on the other hand, are their subjective experiences. So they encompass a wide range of what's called affective states. They not only color our experiences, but they also serve as an important signal which will guide our behaviors and our decision making. They're characterized by being positive or negative, and that's just in terms of characterization. So we would know that some are less pleasant, but in terms of what they are, negative has quite a poor connotation. But ultimately, what negative and positive are telling us, is it something we want to go towards, or is it something that we want to get away from? So if you think of things like fear, generally is away, happiness will be towards. So that's positive and negative. And the level of intensity, so low and high intensity. They're rooted in our evolutionary history. So we've evolved to facilitate survival and social interactions. And if you've heard of reptilian brain versus, anything past that, it's basically how we kept ourselves alive through things like fear, and then social interactions. Being able to read each other's emotions would bring us more connected, closer together if we're in a tribal setting, if we're in a group setting. So if we look at the landscape of emotions, we can have a look at the mechanisms that influence and are influenced by our beliefs. So next old tag there. High road, low road of associations. So emotions, they would be complex subjective experiences, as we've said. And there's, in the name of it, you have the kind of takeaway. So if we were to simplify emotions down to the basics, think of it as emotion. So motion, something that moves towards into action or away from it. It's important when we're assessing a belief. So we were saying last week about looking at our beliefs and really excuse me, my voice is going. Really ascertaining, like, if there is a particular goal that we have, if there's a behavior change that we have, what are our pre-existing beliefs about it, and to be very, very honest about it. If there's a particular job that we're quite nervous to go for, and we go, okay, what is the belief that's holding me back here? The belief could be, I don't feel good enough, whatever that might be. And if we look underneath that, what is the emotion that's driving it? I don't feel good enough could bring up things of fear, could bring up things of shame, could bring up things of self-disgust, which I know sounds a bit, much, but really, like, those, we have to be exceedingly honest when we're ascertaining the emotional drivers that are tied to belief. So in the first week, we saw beliefs will be our filter through which we see experiences, but then underneath that, we have the emotions. Are we moving towards something? Are we moving away from it? And how do we manage and balance that out? So high road and low road, what do I mean by that? So thinking and feeling are kind of thought of as these separate things, but actually our brain kind of mixes and matches them together. We might have a thought that brings up a feeling, that brings up a memory. We'd have a memory that brings up a feeling, that brings up a thought. It all kind of bumps up against each other in associations. So associations would have memories as the main one, and they will be the things that can predicate what's known as an emotional cognitive bias, which I'll go into further in a minute. So a scenario will be colored by the associations your brain already has. So already are in place. You're not taking in the information and doing calculations to create a new one. The quickest way for your brain to conserve energy is actually to go on, what do we already know about this situation, and let's filter it through that. So your brain will take in a scenario and it'll look at memories and emotions that are like it, that are similar, same, but different. And that's processed through the amygdala. So the amygdala is the most important structure in the emotional system. Now, the literature will come out and say what we thought of as fixed areas of the brain having fixed purposes. As we said, very little about the human being is fixed. So the amygdala is the one that predominantly does these things, but other parts of the brain kind of pick up the slack in some areas. So the amygdala is your hyper-vigilant pal, is the way that I put it. The one will say, like, don't walk too close to the edge of the footpath, or be careful, or have you got your jacket on? those kind of overbearing, or like, an overbearing parent. They're looking out for threats constantly because they're always trying to protect you. And I think that's a really important point. It's not just trying to mess up your life, that can be the felt effect sometimes, but predominantly it's trying to protect you. So what it'll do, it'll spot a threat and it gets its little associations. This could be dangerous. And it sends the signal over to the CEO of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, to evaluate it. Now, there's two different paths to the amygdala. There's one that goes straight through the thalamus, and that's known as the low road, and one that ascertains the risks through the prefrontal cortex in the kind of quote unquote correct way of doing it. So the low road, the one that goes straight to the amygdala, as we would imagine, is faster. It's faster, and it's up to actually 20 times faster, which is amazingly lots. And it'll immediately color a situation with the emotional response. So it starts to emotionally react before your brain has caught up, before your prefrontal cortex, which is the one that kind of makes sense of things in a more logical fashion. So your amygdala's already worked on it. You've already, somebody could say something to you and your face is already changing. And then you go, oh, don't make that face. Make a more socially acceptable face. So it already starts to color your experiences, right? And that's very important when we're looking at this. So it's already rattled a memory, it's brought up feelings associated with that memory, and it's already started to color the filters of association by which you're viewing the unfolding situation. So, real world example, you're at work, you've just come off a phone call where somebody was incredibly rude to you, and you start to feel angry, and you start to feel dissatisfied, and you start to feel really miffed with your day. You're walking up the stairs, you catch your foot on the stairs, and you go, God, this whole place is falling apart. This is a terrible place. And you look out the window and you go, God, it's raining. This is awful. And somebody turns around to you and they go, oh, Chloe, do you have a minute? And you go, what? And you chew their head off. And then you have to deal with the unfolding situation. And all of a sudden, that entire situation is seen as this heavy, threatening situation where there's a level of injustice, and you're viewing that entire new second social interaction through the lens of the emotional response that the initial one would have brought up in you. So engaging the prefrontal cortex, the one that kind of does its little logical jobs, that'll help to dissipate this reaction. The reaction is known as the refractory period. It's when there's a kind of like a Klingon, emotional Klingon from, not a Klingon like Star Trek Klingon, an emotional Klingon as well. So what you'll get there is it's kind of, it's a leftover, like a hangover of the initial emotional period starts to color the next situation. That's known as the refractory period. And that's what can prime your environment to be colored through the lens of that initial primary emotional response. So when you're in that refractory period, your brain will look for memories and it'll look for evidence, right? It'll look for ways in which to what's the word I'm looking for, to make what they feel, what you feel, what it feels, valid. So it'll look for memories like it. It'll start to color everything around you to go, I feel this way and I feel I'm correct and valid in feeling this way. So through the lens of the emotion, you're now filtering things through this initial belief system, and it's really, really changing the picture of where you're at and what's actually happening. So that brings us on to what is cognitive dissonance, cognitive bias. So I've kind of touched on it there, but in terms of definition-wise, it would be an influential theoretical framework in understanding beliefs, which was proposed initially in 1957, so a good while back, by a fellow called Festinger. So it posits that the individual will look for internal consistency in their beliefs and attitudes. So as I said, when faced with conflicting information or experiences that challenge existing beliefs, I'm giving you the definition here, which is why my English has changed somewhat. The individuals experience cognitive dissonance, so discomfort. I feel something, the outside is giving me something else. How do I match those things? So to reduce this discomfort, an individual might modify their beliefs or seek out, this is the part now, seeking out confirming information, engaging in what's known as cognitive strategies to restore cognitive consistency. So what that looks like basically is very much like that person that was in the office, where they have an emotion, and to match the fact that their emotion is now in dissonance with their outside, they look for confirmation of validity from outside world. And that shapes how the world is viewed, and it shifts the beliefs about a certain situation. So when a confirmation bias happens, we'll seek out information to make that belief ignore, this is the important part, we will ignore and dismiss anything that does not hold up what we think. And with the best of intentions, with the greatest, most loveliest, kind human soul on the planet, this happens, you know, instantaneously. And there's great amounts of awareness that are needed, because this is it's a process that is automatic, that we really have to check ourselves with. The beliefs will create the filter in which we perceive and interpret the information, and that'll lead to selective attention, memory bias, where we forget all of the times that coworker was so kind and respectful to us. It's just vanished into the abyss. And what we'll do is we'll take an ambiguous situation and we'll align it with our preconceived notions. So beliefs and emotions acting like little goblins together to change our perception of situations. So with the emotions, with their influence on cognition, they can also contribute to this cognitive bias insofar as, and take the reverse of it, optimism. If we look at, you're having the best day in your life, you've just had such a lovely message from home, you're on top of the world, you won 50 euro in the lotto. It's not a huge amount, but it's a great amount. All of a sudden, that starts to also skew our perception and evaluation of situations. So we make biased judgments. They can influence our decision-making processes. So, for example, in an optimistic bias, because we go, geez, Chloe, that sounds like a great day. What's wrong with that? We're more prone to risk taking when we're in a great mood. We're more prone to, again, the memory bias, where we'll forget all of the times that maybe being a little bit careful might have come in handy, and we go, no, nothing could ever go wrong. I feel amazing now. I'm always going to feel this amazing. So we're more prone to risk adverse behaviors when we're in a very, very good mood. So it's a good idea to check ourselves, especially if there's decision making in, if you're making a large decision, get yourself to a nice centered space before making any kind of judgment calls on that, because in a positive and negative push pull kind of way, our emotions will dictate the type of filter. So we have all these different filters, and we'll go, this one is the one that I want to view things through right now. It will color the filter that we choose to see a situation. Emotional attachment to certain beliefs can strengthen the confirmation bias, and the beliefs can also shape the emotional responses, influencing our interpretation of information and contributing to biased judgments. So being hyper aware of cognitive biases and how these can influence our decision making, as well as that cognitive dissonance piece where we already feel something and all of a sudden we're matching everything else. Everything else is kind of coming in. They're very, very good things to keep in your awareness with regards how your emotions and your beliefs can interplay and interact with each other. So key takeaways for today, because I'm conscious that I could talk about these topics forever. Maybe not forever. So developing some self-reflection around examining beliefs and emotions that are driving your thoughts and actions, because they are, no matter who we are, we like to think we're above, emotional responses. We're absolutely not. It takes work, and it takes self-discipline, and it takes self-awareness to be able to recognize that we are in the middle of an emotional reaction because it has brought up associations. We're now viewing something through a filter. I think the greatest example ever is when you are in a fight with a loved one, and they've done something to upset you, and you absolutely refuse to let it go, and you are looking for loads of different reasons why your emotions are valid, and you start to go, oh God, this is derailing at a very rapid rate. But to be aware of that, because if you can go, okay, I'm annoyed and I know about confirmation bias, so I'm annoyed and I'm going to look for reasons to make sure that I feel valid and understood in being annoyed. But really, that's not helping me. That's not helping them. That's not helping the relationship. So being able to say, yeah, I'm definitely annoyed, and I'm starting to look for reasons of it. That could be beyond fairness. Challenging those cognitive biases as they come up, being mindful of emotional biases like confirmation bias, optimism bias, and negativity bias. Looking for diverse perspectives, okay, that's how I feel. What would it be if it was maybe middle of the road of, absolutely good, absolutely bad? Kind of checking yourself. So remember, the more we engage the prefrontal cortex, which is your analytical brain, the less the emotional charge tends to be. So a good way to actually get the prefrontal cortex on booted up is to practice just even a few minutes of mindful breathing. Mindfulness helps to be able to observe, so naming our emotions to cultivate that emotional intelligence. Once we name our emotion, it actually gives us a little bit of space from it where we're able to observe it. When we're able to observe and not just be totally enmeshed in it, we can make more rational decisions. Rational, aka being the homeland of the prefrontal cortex, which dissipates some of the emotional charge, which allows us to regain some degree of control over our behaviors and actions, that we're not just bulls in a china shop going, rah, I'm angry. And fostering a degree of cognitive flexibility, cultivating the openness to new ideas and perspectives. And there's a difference here in like, which I would like to point out, that, having emotions is extremely valid. That's not that shouldn't be one of the key takeaways from this. You have an emotion, it's wrong. No, nothing like that. It's just to be aware that the mechanisms that are inbuilt in how we process do have biases, do have they believe they're right, and they will look for evidence that they're right. So just to be aware that sometimes, especially when you have a degree of decision making, that it's a good idea to regulate that somewhat and to counterbalance it. And even if all that takes is, I think, with pen and paper, it's my way of finding a good detachment from a situation. But whatever way works for you, even if that's taking a big breath and going for a walk, putting on some music and really going inwards and going, okay, how am I actually feeling about this? Is this emotion just after, hitting strongly up against me because of an association with a previous memory I have? Is that situation the same as the previous memory? No, there are some degrees of similarities. So that's when my amygdala has kicked in. Thank you, amygdala. But actually, let's list out all the ways that it's different. And now the amygdala can go, okay, I can see you got this. So that's the kind of key takeaways from today with regards beliefs and emotions. If you have any comments you want to pop in, please do. Always appreciate some comments and feedbacks. If you'd like me to touch on anything in our next chat, the next chat will be about a little bit more of a look at beliefs with regards to the brain specifically, and what's happening there and how can we sidestep that. In our last little chat of the series, we're going to look at applying all of this in practical terms, because it's nice to have the theory, and I always think knowledge and awareness gives people choice back. If these things are operating outside of awareness, we can kind of be stuck without choice. Whereas if there's a degree of awareness on our processes, we can then work with them, not against them. In our last session, we're going to look at harnessing the power of emotions, harnessing the way that your brain functions with regards its mechanism, and aligning those two. So emotion can give loads of motivational drive towards a specific goal and action. So we're going to look at the beliefs, use my little frame here, the beliefs and emotions, and how to actually utilize those as best as possible to give yourself the drive towards your goals that will help you to enact them from a place of utilizing all of your lovely processes with you, not against you. So that's me for today. No comments in so far, but do pop in, and I will be back next week with the third part of the series of 4. I'm hoping you're enjoying these so far. They do kind of collate together towards the end, and you'll kind of go, okay, this is why she's yammering on about those things. That's me for today anyway, guys. Have a lovely day wherever you are. I hope you're getting a little bit of sunshine over here. It is lovely, and we will talk to you next week. Bye, guys.